Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. I have two special guests here. Sting.
Good day.
Dominic Miller, who's been playing with Sting for about 30 years, right?
Yeah, 31.
31 years.
Yeah.
It's an honor to meet both of you. I've been a massive fan, as many of you know, because I've made many videos about Sting, including one called Why Sting is Uncopyable. And I want to actually start off by talking to you about this Sting, the reasons that you're uncopyable. And there are musical reasons why. I know that you have a background in jazz. I want to talk about kind of musically how your knowledge of music influenced the things that you write. For example, I use a song, I Burn For You, as an example of a melody that uses the Aeolian mode, or uses the flat six, which you really lean into. On the symphonic record, it's in E minor, so you hit that note C a lot in the melody, da, 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 and it's so beautiful. Those surprises, I call them haunting tones or upper extensions. Can you talk about that, about the use of these notes?
Well, I like the way you use the word surprise, because me, the essence of all music is surprise. When I listen to a piece of music, if I'm not surprised within the first 8 bars, I've stopped listening. I've switched off. I need surprise. Dominic and I both have a teacher called J.S. Bach, and you play 8 measures of Bach, and you're surprised every time. Every time, and then the next 8 bars and the next 8 bars. So composition is really about surprise. It's not about theory for me, it's just an instinct that I have. The song you mentioned is also in 3/4 time.
Yeah.
I love 3. It's very old-fashioned. You can only do a waltz to it. It's not military, but there's something about a waltz that I'm a sucker for, 6/8 time, which I adore. And, I just have fun with that stuff. I'm not here to belong to a genre or adapt myself to any kind of rules. I just do what I instinctively feel I want to do. And I'm lucky to have that opportunity and that privilege to do that. I'm also helped by some fantastic musicians who feel the same way, exploring the whole spectrum of music and not just saying, we're in this ghetto here, but they're not. They play everything, jazz, classical, pop, soul.
So the impetus for these ideas, though, when you're starting to write a song, historically, you would start with the instrumental demo. Tell me about the process of how you actually craft a melody and a song and a lyric.
You start with a little germ of an idea, a cadence. Your fingers might find something. So that's interesting. Let's take it a little further. Without that spark of interest, without that little building block, there's nowhere to go, So you have a guitar riff or something, but a guitar riff is not a song.
Right.
A guitar riff needs to be structured. And once I have a structure of a song, maybe a traditional structure, verse, chorus, bridge, key change, coda, that's the ideal for me, even though it's not terribly fashionable at the moment. The structure tells me a story. Some people listen to music and they see color. Mm-hmm. I see characters, I see situations, I hear lines that people say or a refrain, but it's the music that's telling me the story, but it needs structure. A riff on its own won't do that.
So what will you typically do first if you're writing a song like Fortress Around Your Heart? That's a song that I talked about in my video about why you're uncopyable. Now that song is very odd, actually.
Oh boy,
It's incredibly melodic, yet it changes keys 3 times just in the verse. You start in G minor to A flat major, and then you get on F sharp minor, which is very weird, yet it sounds completely normal to the ear. And then you go into the chorus, which is in G, E minor, D over F sharp, G, then C, A minor, C, D. How would you even come up with an idea like that? That song is so unique.
It starts with there's 3 chords, and then I just go on an adventure with it, and just find it. It writes itself, and you just have to be open to it. Just have to be in a state of grace where the music will tell you where it goes next. You know, how do you know I'm supposed to go there? I just do. You know, I'm not a trained musician. I'm not a conservatory musician. I just have this trust that harmony will lead me in the right direction.
You're not a trained musician, but you played gigs as a jazz musician.
I held a
for
job
years.
down, you know, reading charts in,
Yeah.
in a big band and in the theater. I could still do that if I had to. I need to brush up a little bit.
So you're somewhat of a trained musician.
Yeah, I just didn't go to a conservatory. But,
Right.
I envy people who did. At the same time, it forces you to exercise a different kind of muscle. You know, I know some amazing musicians who can play just about anything, but don't write. You
Right.
know? So there's a different part of the brain which is used. So I'm happy where I am.
Are there any of your big songs that went unfinished for a long period of time? They all come
I'll
like
finish.
that.
I'll finish them, or I decide not to finish them.
Mm-hmm.
Lyrics are difficult. Dominic would say, "Where'd you get that lyric from?" I said, "I just walk in the garden and it's under a rock." Now, we wrote a song together. How many years? 30 years ago. "Shape of My Heart."
Mm-hmm.
Dom came in with this fantastic riff, beautiful cadence, sort of Bach-like descending bass line, and I said, okay, so we spent the morning, you know, structuring it, making it into a song. Here's a verse here and a verse there, and there's a key change there. So I'll just go for a walk, and I have it in my headphones, and I just walk around. A few hours later, I've got at least the concept of what the song is telling me, which is about a gambler. And Dom said, where'd you get this shit from? I said, I don't know. It just occurs to me, but the music tells me the story.
Dom, when you played that riff, that thing has been sampled by so many people and used for songs. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a huge compliment, I think. But I mean, the truth behind that one is that riff is that I just actually came up with that motif as an exercise for myself, just as a warm-up exercise based on sixth chords.
Yep.
And it's like that takes inspiration from kind of from Chopin type chords, piano chords. I was just messing around with that, kind of like the way John McLaughlin would write chord sequences. He wasn't really articulating the third so much. It's much more about the sixth is what like tells you what it is. And so I was just having fun with that. And what I think about it is when I hear rappers and artists using that riff, I'm kind of smiling at myself. First of all, thinking that unbeknownst to them, they're actually playing classical music from Europe. Right. And because I can't really claim it as my own, really, because that was the source. Right. And I just reorganized that idea. And then it was Sting's imagination as a songwriter this is a perfect example of collaboration, he was the one who said, look, that is a song. And I'm going, it's just an exercise, mate. And cut to he walks in the garden and comes back with a lyric. And that song was written in a day. It was just done. It didn't take 3 months. And sometimes songs are like that, you know. So I'm very flattered, but I don't really claim total ownership with it because I know where it came from. And it came from classical music.
Sting, I've said this many times on my YouTube channel that if the Police came out today, if a song like Roxanne came out and no one had ever heard the Police, that people would say, what is that? That is amazing.
Good.
And you said an interesting thing. I listened to your Audible book that you did recently, and you talked about there's a small window of time when, as a punk band, you kind of snuck in the door with the Police. But I disagree with that. I think that any time you would have been successful because of your voice, the way that you write songs, the uniqueness of it would have always risen above. Roxanne, in its form that it was, out in 2021, people would say, what is that? That is amazing. What do you think about that?
You know, I opened the current show with a version of it that I wrote in Paris in 1978, just on a guitar. It was a kind of a bossa nova. The same melody, but the same chords, but without that quirky thing that, you know, Stuart and I worked out together, where the bass was on the second beat. But the song still resonates today as if it was a modern song. And a lot of our songs still do. They're not rooted in time, they're sort of unmoored.
That's
you
right.
know? And that's what I like. I love that. They don't sound like they belong to 1978. It belongs to now.
When I was in 10th grade, it was 1978, and the first time I heard that on the radio, you could hear your voice above the noise of the car, even with the radio down low, because the register that you sang in. And I immediately turned it up. I said, what is that? Wow. And then I'd ask my friends, have you heard that song Roxanne? It's like, yeah. Who's that band? It's like, they're called The Police.
I think register is interesting. You know, most heavy metal singers sing up
high,
there.
yeah.
So I'm a heavy metal singer, but I have a little more melody. And it's the same way that, you know, to get above the noise of the band, you need that register. You can't be a baritone with a rock band, really. Right. Same way a sergeant major in the army would scream and yell on the parade ground. You know why? Because they had to get over the sound of artillery in battle. You know, charge or retreat. They needed to be heard. Singers have the same need.
I would argue that voice then, today, on the radio or on Spotify or on Apple Music, would have the exact same effect. You just don't hear singing like that. And frankly, the song forms, maybe they might have to be altered slightly. Maybe the interlude after the first chorus is chopped out and you go right to the second verse. You know, I think of, you know, King of Pain. It's so an odd song, right? It's still an odd song.
is.
It still is an odd song. What's up with the long break in there? How was the timing of that? Was that just, were you guys looking at each other and
we're just messing around,
just goofing around, right?
Yeah, I just thought of it as a sort of operatic song, really. It has different chapters in it. We didn't care. I mean, we just wanted to have fun.
Well, your music changed from The Police to Dream of the Blue Turtles. Your music was evolving. It started evolving really on the Ghost in the Machine album, more keyboard. You were using more keyboards. Keyboards, I guess, were being invented at the time, really, right? You know, so it's like you start using more keyboards, and then on Synchronicity, and then Dream of the Blue Turtles, big departure, stylistically, new band, but melodically, even more sophisticated melodically. The songs were evolving, but they were still songs that were hit songs.
Yeah. You know, I just wanted a larger palette. And the three pieces is a wonderful vehicle, but it's limited.
Yeah.
You know, drums, bass, and guitar. And I think we achieved an amazing amount of stuff in the short time we were together. Very unique. But I just wanted a broader palette because I was song-driven and not necessarily band-driven. Right. So I then started to form bands which could play whatever I wanted to write. So the first album that I did without the Police was with Branford and Kenny Kirkland and
Omar
and
Daryl Jones,
fantastic group, all from the jazz world. And that was one thing, but the palette was widened, and then I formed a band with Dominic and Vinny and David Sanchez. But they had a breadth of experience in playing any kind of genre. So whatever I felt like writing, they could help me do it. The Police was one thing. The Police needed to be the Police, just the Police. But I wanted to spread it a little more.
So Dominic, did you start on Soul Cages or on 10
Soul
Songs?
Cages, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to come back to one thing about the Police. I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony a couple weeks ago in Cleveland. I was struck by the fact that I thought about the Police when I saw the Police on the wall there, and I thought, there is a band that went out at the top, and how few bands go out at their peak. Is that satisfying? It has to be.
Yeah.
Do you think about that?
My instinct was that we'd achieved everything we could possibly have thought to achieve, tenfold, 100-fold. After that, you get diminishing returns of satisfaction. So I needed to take another risk with my life. And of course I had momentum because of the success of the Police. Whatever I did next, people would be at least curious. And so I used that momentum to kind of boost me into another career. But it was a risk. But I think art is always about taking a risk. If you're not taking a risk, you're not doing it.
Without mentioning any artists, do you ever look at artists and think to yourself, oh, they should have stopped years ago? As far as at the height of their
Yes, I do.
Of their
I think
bands?
it's very hard to leave a band after a certain point, because a band is like a teenage gang. It's like a street gang. You don't want to be in a street gang for the rest of your life.
Right.
You can't mature. You can't explore. You have to be stuck with this regiment of 3 people, say. That's it. So no, we shouldn't mention anybody, but there's no way out for them now.
And do you think that they know that too? Do you have friends that
I
are...
have no idea.
Okay.
I know.
But of course you think that you...
Sometimes
I'm not saying I'm not saying that the people, didn't mean to interrupt, that the people at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that I feel that way about any of them. I'm just saying that I thought about when I was looking at the police on the wall there, that struck me.
But people are. I admire AC/DC, for example. I think what they do is fantastic. The way they play together, the sound is fantastic. You always know what you're getting with an
That's
ACD
right.
record. It's the high quality, but you know what you're going to get.
You know what you're going to get.
So, but that's not me.
If I were to say to you guys, just think about the records that you've played on together. What is a record that... there's always records that come out, where the production and the songwriting, where you listen back to, you say, boy, we nailed it on that. Is there a song? What's something that you feel that way?
I think 10 Sumner's Tales is probably the one that stands out for me, because from top to bottom, every song, it's like perfect. But for more emotional reasons, probably the Soul Cages, because I didn't know Sting then. He didn't really know me. And in a way, I had a lot more freedom as a musician to just do my thing, because he was trying to discover who this new guy was. So I had total freedom on that record. And it was my first, entry into the Sting world. And so for that reason, I think Soul Cages. But what's your opinion?
Well, we should diverse, really. We should talk about your audition.
Do we have to talk about
Yes, we
that?
do. I think it's very important for musicians to realize this. So Dom turns up in New York. I've heard he's got a good reputation in London. So he turns up and he's struggling to get a sound out of his amp, and he's checking valves and he's checking everything. And this goes on for a long time. It's kind of getting frustrating. And then I just turned to the volume knob on his guitar and turned it up.
So at that point, I thought, okay, just tell me to F off now, and I'm fine with that.
Right.
I got a trip to New York out of it, and I'm going to go out for a nice meal. And but then we jammed.
What did we jam on? What did we jam on?
We jammed on
Ain't No Sunshine.
Ain't No Sunshine, and we did a bunch of different things, all genres, and nothing was a real problem. Because I'm a muso, I've been listening to all the stuff that you've been listening to, Rick, like a Weather Report, John McLaughlin, like a lot of everything, rock, Jeff Beck,
Yeah.
So nothing was a real problem, but, we just jammed, and...
I think we wrote a couple of songs that day, actually.
Probably, but I wasn't really nervous at that point, because I thought I've already lost the gig. So, so I thought, let's just do this, but it just
Good
kept
thing.
going on and on and on, and after about 3 hours, I was ready to go home, I'm fine with it. I got to hang with Sting, we jammed, and it was cool. And then he went, I just want to have a word with you. And he said, what are you doing in the next few months? And I went, what do you mean? Well, do you want to hang in this band? And I went, yeah, absolutely. So, cut to 30 years later. And
We had Manu Katché on drums.
Yeah, Manu Katché.
Pretty good trio.
Not too shabby.
But that album, for me, if you're asking about a record that means something to me deeply, it's the Soul Cages, and it's my least understood record in many ways, but it has a constituency of the recently bereaved that will come up to, because I just lost both my parents died in the same year. So that's what I was subconsciously writing about. And to this day, people come up saying, oh, my dad died, that album really meant a lot to me, and which is very nourishing for a songwriter to hear that your songs have a utility beyond just, for your own solace. It actually helps other people. So that album is a very special one for me. It was Dominic's, introduction into my world. Kenny Kirkland was on that record, and Manu Katché. Man, it was they were great sessions. They were very emotional.
But I remember on that album, Stingo, that when one of the first song that we recorded with Kenny Kirkland, he was in his own booth, and I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Headphones are on, and we're doing a take, and Kenny's playing away, and then he tacits. He stops playing. I'm thinking, that's how these guys do it. That's like the school of Miles Davis, and the people know when not to play. And then we carry on with the song, and still he's not coming back in. And I'm thinking, okay, well, he's not coming back in. And then we got to the end of the song. He never came back in. And then when I went to the control room, I had to go via Kenny's booth to get to the control room. He was asleep on the couch. So I thought,
laid
okay,
back.
This is the
yeah.
world of Sting. This is how laid back these musicians are. And
that's how they lay out.
And,
right. I think I remember you doing an interview when 10 Sumner's Tales came out. If I Ever Lose My Faith was the single, and you said that you would never make a record unless you had a couple these flagship songs, at least these singles like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very aware thing to say. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, if you have to define what I am, I'm a popular musician. I like to sell records.
Yes.
And that demands flagships, songs that can get on the radio. Now that's getting more and more difficult at our age, because there's a great deal of ageism in our industry. But at the time, you needed at least 2 songs that the radio could, oh yeah, we'll play that. And then you could fill it in with interesting stuff. But you needed the flagship. And I think you still do. I think we've got one on the new record which comes out on the 19th, Rushing Water. It sounds like a flagship to me.
So how do you know that you have these songs, Sting? Is it just that from experience, from having so many hit songs in the past that okay, this is one? Or do you actually play them for people and kind of see people's reaction?
Yeah. I mean, we're very collegiate. We tend to react from people's responses to songs, the other musicians, the people around us, the engineer, the wives, girlfriends, how they react. But I also have an instinct, very finely honed instinct for it. Some things will never get on the radio, but you don't care. They're good pieces of work anyway. But they need to be boosted by the flagship.
When you finish a song, okay, let's say you're going to play it for Dom, are you nervous the first time you play something? You have a demo of a song? Or?
Well, the whole songwriting enterprise is fraught with anxiety,
Always.
Will I ever write another song? Will I ever write one as good as that one? So you finish a song and that feeling of calm and satisfaction lasts about 20 minutes, and then where's the next one? And you're never sure, My theory of creativity is like fishing. You go to the river, you throw a line in, and you don't catch anything. Next day, the same, next day, same. Maybe by Thursday, you catch a fish. But I know this, unless you go to the river with a line, you ain't going to catch a fish. So turn up. You turn up in the studio with your musicians, be patient, something will happen. Something will happen. Not immediately, but it will happen.
Do you get up in the morning and write, I have a great idea for a song, a lyric or something? Or do you actually have to sit down and just mess around till you come up with something?
I mean, there's no one way to write a song. And I try all methods. I've started with a lyric first. But messing around is a good start. It's a good start. You clock on at 11 o'clock and you start messing around. And something, play that again? That works with that. Okay, twist that round. Let's take the tempo up a little bit, change the key. You're playing with plasticine and it's incredibly elastic. So you just have fun. And say, let me just sit with that for a while. You go for a walk and say, okay, I know what to do now. I put a verse in there and then a key change here. It's a jigsaw. I like puzzles. Music for me is a fascinating three-dimensional puzzle.
But the arrangement is very important to you, right? Because you always historically came up with parts. Back in the Police, everybody thinks, Andy Summers would come up with the drum part or with the guitar parts, and Stewart would come up with the drum parts. But you came up with these parts, the chord voicings and things like that. That was your. right? I mean, that's true.
I would prearrange the songs.
Yeah.
But, Andy and Stuart were fantastic musicians, and they would always add something to what I'd created. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I wasn't just limited to the bass, no.
Right. But I think that that's a misconception with people, that I always thought to myself, well, yeah, Sting must have come up with those voicings himself.
Yeah.
And
I still do.
Yeah. Okay, so Dom, when Sting plays you a demo of a song and he's got a guitar part on it, tell me about your process as far as how you take something. If I Ever Lose My Faith, there must have been a demo of that song, right?
Actually, I think I was around when he came up with that.
Okay.
What usually fascinates me first, before anything else, is the way that Sting comes up with a 2 or 3 chord sequence that I just go, what is that? As you said earlier, his dialect or his language is uncopyable.
Yeah.
And those are the times where you're absolutely right. I'm thinking nobody else would have come up with those 3 chords. A good example is, let's say, The Hounds of Winter is the chords in that song, if you have a listen. It's like, where did that come from? So my process is just to like dig deep into it while he's already on to the next thing. He's thinking about, and I'll do a lot of the obsessing for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'll come back after I go for a walk in the garden and show some options around that idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's my role kind of thing, is like to present options based on this incredible 2 or 3 chord sequence. And that is, If I Ever Lose My Faith is no different. I heard the idea that he just came up with, and so I had a lot of fun just messing around with all the options. But it's still his idea. It's his baby,
It's a tennis game, though.
Yeah.
I'll serve. He'll serve the ball back, but it's a slightly different spin on it, and then it goes back to him, so it carries on. It's a lovely
Interesting thing
ricochet.
about that song. So in the first time around in the bass, you do that do 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 do, but then you don't do it the second time or third time, and that is such a hook, and it's just something that always will grab people's ears. It's one of these things that people don't notice, but they do notice it. The subconscious hook that's in the bass.
Oh, I did that deliberately.
Yeah,
No,
that's a total
it's
deliberate
about
thing,
surprise.
right? Yeah. And
You expect to hear it again? You're not going to hear it again. Forget it.
Right, and the fact that it doesn't happen the second time is like, oh, I got to wait for it to come around again. When's it going to come around again? And then the next verse comes and you hear it and you're like, oh, yeah, I love that. So every time I hear that song, that's one of those things that just immediately grabs my ear.
Yeah.
Right down to how short you're playing the bass notes, and that with the groove, it's very meticulous. I know that you're very aware of all these things.
It's a very interesting place to lead a band from, being the singer, being the bass player.
Yeah.
The keyboard player, Dominic, could play a C chord. Unless I play a C, it's not a C chord.
That's right.
So I control the harmony.
You do.
I'm also controlling the top line because I'm singing it.
Yeah.
So the band literally is operating within my bandwidth.
That's right.
And I don't
That's where all
have
the
to
counterpoint is.
wield a big stick there. It's a subtle way of leading a band. And it's a position I find very satisfying. It's a wonderfully malleable unit that you can manage, and everyone has to have a good time and everyone has to shine. I adore my musicians shining. That makes my job easier. I give you the ball, you got to run with it. And so we're a good band.
Okay, so why did you go from playing with a pick to playing with your thumb?
Sound. With the Police, I would double all the bass parts on a Fender Strat and a pick. So it just had that edgy sound. And I'd always play with my fingers as well. But for the Police, I started, it was the punk time. But yeah, I'd been playing jazz before. I would never use a pick.
Right.
It was frowned upon. But then I went back to playing with my thumb, and then I use a technique called apoyando from Spanish guitar.
Guitar,
It's hidden. All my work is hidden under here. You think I'm just using my thumb? I'm not. And I damp a lot, which just makes the notes short.
And that you started to do probably in the 80s or so, right? You started playing, you switched your playing.
Yeah.
But I noticed that, but you've never really come back.
To pick?
Yeah.
No, I haven't played a pick for a while.
Was it ever difficult to play songs that some of these really syncopated tunes with the Police? Would you have to practice them until they became?
Yeah, you just slow everything down when you know where the furniture is, you know where the bodies are. You can play anything if you slow it down. So that I would do that, and with a new record, I've sung it in the studio. I played the bass at a different time, but to do it together, I need to practice. I still practice.
Have to, right?
There's no other way. Right? We practice.
Dom, you practice, right?
Yeah, I do. I practice Bach, actually, very badly.
We both do.
And very slowly. And that's my kind of thing. And if I can do that, and I learned a very good lesson about practice from one of Sting's musicians who still comes around occasionally, Jason Rebello. He says that if it sounds good when you're practicing, you're doing it wrong. And what he means by that is... and I thought, yeah, what do you mean by that? It says that is to practice without dynamics is one of the most difficult things to do. So every note has no personality. It's just even. And that's really difficult to do. And that's why Bach is the best music to do that with, because the personality is already in the music. So you don't have to do anything, but just play evenly. And, yeah, I practice occasionally, but not enough.
So, Sting, if you were able to meet one musician, go back in time and hear one musician play?
That would be J.S. Bach for both of us. We sit at his feet every day. We play a bit of Bach every day. A bit of the cello suites, a bit of the partitas. You wouldn't want to hear what we do, but we're learning the whole time. Absolutely. And so we're already sitting at his feet. It's all out there on the page.
Do you think that music today is, from what you hear, I mean, you must occasionally fire up Spotify or see what's out there. Tell me what your thoughts are, without being, you don't have to be specific. What are your thoughts about modern songwriting, about things like auto-tune?
There's some great musicians and great songwriters and great music out there. What I have noticed, though, is structure is slightly simpler now. It's minimalist. The bridge has disappeared.
There is no bridge.
For me, the bridge is therapy. You set a situation out in a song. My girlfriend left me. I'm lonely. Chorus, I'm lonely. You reiterate that again. And then you get to the bridge. There's a different chord comes in, and think maybe she's not the only girl on the block. Maybe I should look elsewhere. And then that leads to that viewpoint leads to a key change in the chord. Things aren't so bad. So it's kind of therapy, and that's therapy for me. The structure is therapy. In modern music, most of it, you're in the circular, trap, really. It just goes round and round and round. And it fits nicely into the next song and the next song and the next song, but you're not getting that release, that sense that there is a way out of our crises. And we are in crisis. The world is in crisis. We're in a political crisis. We're in the pandemic crisis. We're in the climate crisis. Music needs to show us a way out. And modern music isn't doing that at the moment.
So there is no music for today, right? There is no real music that describes what is going on in the world today.
I'm looking for solutions. I'm not looking to just reiterate my problem. I want to see how to get out of it. So music can help.
If you took the bridge out of Every Breath You Take, to me that's one of the greatest bridges ever written. The key change.
Thank you.
It's just amazing. It's completely unexpected. It's one of the best parts of the song.
It is the best part of the song.
It is the best part of the song. Okay, I didn't want to say that.
I look forward to singing that part every night because it's athletic for a start. But it is that fantastic release.
Tell me about the process for this new record and how long you've been working on it.
Well, more than any other record, this was a collaboration between Dominic and myself. I think Dom came up with the original, kernel of an idea for at least 3 or 4 songs. I mean, that's interesting. He brought something from his album Absinthe, which I loved, something in 5/4 called Etude, and I listened to it and I went, "There's 8 bars near the end of that. Can we just take that out?" I said, "Sure." So we excised those 8 bars and we looped it, and he started to play it. And then I improvised a line against it. I had no idea what the lyric would be, but and I love compound time. It just makes me very excited. And we ended up with a song called Harmony Row. but the kernel of it was Dominic's piece.
We did a waltz.
We did a beautiful waltz.
It's got to have a waltz.
Again,
have
I'm
a
a sucker
waltz.
for a waltz. If he brings a waltz in, I'm there. And that was called the Bells of St. Thomas. So it's a lovely collaboration.
Talk about making records in the 70s, Police days, versus the records that you guys made later on, as far as how much time you would spend.
Yeah.
With the Police, you came out with the records in 78, 79, 80, 81, and 83. And there was touring with all that.
Yeah.
How long would I mean, I know about the first record, but how long would the other records take?
Not long at all.
2 weeks?
Yeah, a few weeks. You wouldn't have that many choices. You would, it was a take.
Yeah.
Find a good take, and then, mess around with it. But now there's so many variables. So work expands to how many variables you can accomplish. So at the time, you had to make a choice, but you had to be able to play too. If you couldn't play,
Let's talk about that for a minute. Being able to play when you recorded on tape. I mean, you guys started your careers, a lot of your careers were done recording on tape. People don't have to record on tape. People can record one bar, they can loop it, they can fix whatever.
Yeah.
Talk about the type of musicians that, like, how you had to actually be a decent musician to be in a recording studio or to make records back in the day.
Well, I mean, to make a record, you had to have a certain level of musicianship.
Right.
People would do recording tests. For singers, had to go into a recording studio and make sure they could sing in tune, because there was no other way. They had to sing in tune. So musicians had to know how to tune their instruments, or know how to play. I prefer that we came up that way, just as I prefer that we learned our craft as performing musicians in clubs, in pubs, and of course that shop floor of that industry is gone now. There aren't many rock clubs. There aren't many pubs with music licenses. The clubs have gone. So the only way you can make it in the music business now is to go on X Factor or America's Got Talent or something, which is wonderful. But the groundwork, the backbone building of a career, it's impossible to have. And I don't envy younger artists that. I think you're missing something.
I always wanted to ask you about the idea of songs with a one-line hook. Message in Metal has multiple single-line hooks that are repeated over. The Beatles were masters of this. I want to hold your hand, I want to hold your hand, I want to hold your hand. Let it be, they just repeat the same phrase 4 times.
Yep.
And a lot of the Police hits and a lot of the hits on your solo career would have a repeated hook.
I'm glad you mentioned the Beatles, because the reason I'm a musician is because of the Beatles. They were from Liverpool, I was from Newcastle, both port towns in the north of England, working class. They both had the same education as me. I went to a grammar school. They were scholarship boys, smart, working class kids. They conquered the world with their own songs, and therefore gave permission to a younger generation, a decade younger, permission to try the same thing. Oh, we'll try that. I know those 4 chords. I could do that probably, and we all tried. And
Some succeeded.
Oh, some succeeded by the skin of their teeth, but we owe a lot to the Beatles. They really were an amazing influence on all of our lives.
Tell me some Beatles songs that are, both of you guys, that you think are just incredibly perfect songs.
Don't play Yesterday.
No.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. You'll like this. This is Dom's own version of Yesterday.
He's making me do it.
This is classic.
All my trouble seems
Far
He just
away.
likes it when I go to the major. I can't believe
genius.
I've been made to
It's
do
genius.
this
It's genius.
on your show.
Yes, that's.
I've got so many other things I could do.
I think
man.
that's. They probably should have done that. Paul should have done that. Sting, what is a great? Name me like a Beatles song that is you think is a.
Hundreds of them. Blackbird, Penny Lane.
I like Day in the Life because that's
Yeah.
a great example of 2 songwriters with 2 songs.
2 songs. It's
Mashing
really
them
2
up.
songs.
But I love that that period of Beatles as well.
McCartney was asked last year, what song do you wish you'd written? And he picked one of mine and
Fields
asked
of Gold,
for,
right?
for my reaction, saying, one, I wish I'd written like 100 Paul McCartney songs. So, yeah.
I interviewed Peter Frampton, and I said to him, Peter, what's the best ballad ever written? He immediately said Whiter Shade of Pale.
Oh, I love that song.
He's like,
Which is
that Whiter
very
Shade of
Bach.
Pale. Very Bach.
It's J on a G string.
Totally, it's like descending bass line.
I love the lyrics of that song because they're totally meaningless and that they sum up an entire era. You know, and they have their own internal Dadaist logic, which is fantastic. It's a great song.
When did you start really getting into music?
You know, I started listening to folk music a lot. In my area, it's a very strong tradition of songs, Scottish, Irish folk songs, but you know, from Newcastle, we're called Geordies, and coal mining songs, work songs, sea shanties. And then I got into American country music. I used to listen to Hank Williams and got the Hank Williams songbook and sat down with all the chord shapes and learned, you know, 4-chord, 3-chord songs. Johnny Cash, of course. But, you know, my musical education was very wide. My mother was a piano player and she'd bring records into the house. She brought 78s of Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard. My dad liked big band, jazz and Sinatra. And then the BBC, there's only one radio station,
Right.
would play everything from, you know, Beethoven's Fifth to the Beatles. And so you got this sense that music was a broad spectrum and not just this kind of thing that advertisers designed, you know.
Right.
Let's just appeal to 19-year-olds. It was everything. And so music for me is a common language, and I like to be able to speak with all musicians. This weekend I'm working with an orchestra, and, you know, I pride myself on knowing how that thing works and being able to discuss arrangements with those people. So music for me is a spectrum.
Dom, did you grow up in the same way that
Pretty
listening
much,
to...
yeah. Yeah. I've just, the Beatles, of course, you know, a cross-section of, I was brought up in South America, so that was a huge influence on my musical upbringing, you know, like...
You born in Buenos Aires?
Yeah,
is
in
that
Buenos
right?
Aires. So Argentine music and Brazilian music was always there when I was a kid. So that mixed with the Beatles and the Stones and Paul Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah, so I mean, it's all the same stuff, and it kind of got into my skin.
Do you feel like you were lucky, Sting, to have been born when you were, because you guys were inventing the language? There's not a lot left to invent. Not that there's nothing left to invent, but it's very hard to stay within the parameters and that people will accept as popular music and do something original with it.
You know, every time we think we've hit the wall culturally, there's a way through. We have hit a wall, and we're all searching for the way through. So I'm not entirely pessimistic. I have a sense of optimism. I'm looking for it. Everyone's looking for it. Some genius will break the wall down. This is where we need to go. But, you know, I mean, modern symphonic music can't get past the 12-tone scale. I mean, it's a massive cliff. But I'm hopeful, and I think it's music and society and history are all very much wound up. You know, we're stuck at the moment.
I think it seems like every 30 years there's some big shake-up, and I think the last time that happened was 30 years ago with Nirvana.
Yeah.
Where they just like, do you remember that time?
Yeah, I do remember that song.
That was when we were on tour at the time. I remember seeing that video on MTV and thinking, what the hell is that? And it just, since then, everything kind of changed. And so we're due for another, and I see what you mean. I'm not pessimistic either. I'm sure there's something out there ready to be revealed.
Do you think that the way that young people consume music, though, with Spotify playlists being recommended to them, you know, using algorithms, that changes the way that...
I mean, there's so many good things about the way you can stream anything that you can think of.
Yep.
If any recording you can access almost immediately, and that's a wonderful tool, for a learning tool. At the same time, it reduces music into a commodity you can turn on like coffee, and respect it less. You know, music 200 years ago, you had to go and walk 20 miles, maybe on a Sunday, to hear it in church, or a concert once in a blue moon, or buying a record. You'd take it out of the sleeve and the inner sleeve, and you'd lovingly, ritually place it on the thing, and the stylus would go on, and the white noise. That was a religious exercise for me. That doesn't exist anymore. It's coming back, of course. Vinyl's coming back, but that sense of an artifact that means something to you, and the liner notes, you would pour through every sentence, and you knew who played on it, where the bands they'd been in before, who engineered the thing. You knew all that information. Now the commodity just fills the glass, and you drink it.
Talk about why that's important. And I totally agree with this 100% about. It's important to make the connection, not just who made the records, who's in the band even.
Yeah.
Who are the players? Everybody knew who the Beatles were. They knew they knew who all the Stones were. They knew who the Police were. They knew all your individual names.
There should be a way in the streaming world where you can access all of that information, where everything can be.
When you hit the credits on Spotify, it'll just show you the songwriter credits.
Yeah.
At least when I look on there, I don't see who's the information, who are the producers, who are the engineers, things like that. Those things are important, especially to the producer.
Yeah. But there's a whole universe of information that's useful for people
and
interested
it's out
in
there,
music.
but it's not connected with the music like it was on the album cover. And the liner notes were very important to records as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like records, the album, the reason why the album is kind of slowly becoming extinct is because originally it was enough music that you could fit on a vinyl, which is 5 songs either side, because you could only get 38 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And so we're stuck with that model. And the young generation now, I don't think they really identify with 10 songs as a collection. They just want to hear one song.
I still think in that model, though. I still think about A-sides and B-sides. And
so do I.
Putting a song at the end of the side A where you'd be compelled to turn it over.
Yeah. And while we're sitting...
It doesn't make any sense, really, but that's the way I think.
Yeah, we're obsessing about the order of an album. This should be the opening tracks, like you spend days on it, and nobody gives a
Well, you don't want the same key.
Back to back.
Or, the same tempo. You need to have... I think in terms of albums. I like people to think of buying our records and listening to it for 40 minutes.
So do I.
I may be being naive and unrealistic.
The ritual of turning it over was good. That's when you would put the kettle on again and discuss what you heard on side A, and then listen to side B. Like a Pink Floyd album. It's like you're halfway through Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, there's a lot to digest there, to talk about, and then enjoy the second half.
When a new Police record would come out and I'd go to the store to buy it, you didn't know what was going to be on it. You'd hear the song of the first single on the radio. Then you'd buy the album and you'd sit there, I can't wait to hear this. What is it going to be like? I remember when Ghost in the Machine came out, just sound of the record, the dark reverbs and things like that. And you had Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, which it's one of the most interesting, weirdest songs. Once again, there's no song at all like it. Was that song a demo that the band that you had Stuart Copeland play over? Can you tell me about that?
I demoed it in Montreal. And what the kernel of interest for me was the whole tone scale and the bass. And then that led me to a very ordinary chorus, major key. But I took it to the band, and it wasn't really a Police song. It had keyboards on it, and so I had to fight hard to put that. I said, "This is the flagship, man.
Right.
All the dense stuff, all that dark stuff needs somebody waving the flag, and this is it." And so I convinced them, and eventually Stuart played a fantastic.
He played one of his best drum parts on that.
Yes, he did.
He really did.
It took a lot of work, though, a lot of convincing, but I knew he could do it.
So
he's a fantastic drummer.
He's amazing. Did you have a multi-track of it that you brought in and he played over it and Andy played over it?
I would do that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It annoyed the hell out of them, but I did that.
The chorus is actually not ordinary. Maybe it's a 3-chord chorus, but every single phrase you changed the bass figure, the rhythm of it.
Why not?
I know, right? Is that something that you're just, I'm just jamming on this?
I'm just jamming.
Just jamming, right?
I wasn't thinking too
Do,
much.
do, 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 do.
I mean, we still play that song in the set, you know, and I never play the same thing twice, really. I was looking for an incremental change in every arrangement. And when we do the song, a song that could have been written 40 years ago, I always find something tiny, either in the way I sing it or the way I play the bass, or we've arranged something different. That keeps a song alive. A song is a living artifact. It's an organism. It's not a museum piece. You know, it's living. So you have to breathe oxygen into it.
If you would play a song like that, what would you play?
Generally speaking, with my rule with police songs is, who am I to put my kind of personality into this? It's already there. So for two reasons, I play the guitar parts the way, like Roxanne or Every Breath or Walking on the Moon, the way they are. One, because they're really good parts.
Yeah.
And secondly, because I want the audience to know that I appreciate those parts and what Andy did. You know, it's like, I'm not going to come here and do my thing. So it's very easy for me and very, very satisfying because they're such good songs. I never get tired of playing those songs, and I've played them thousands of times.
Yeah.
You know, and it's never boring, ever, to play Every Breath You Take, for instance, which I could probably play in a coma. You know?
He's been known to.
Really? Was that the 90s we're talking about? No, okay.
Okay, could I get you guys to play a song here?
What do you want?
Play
What have we got here?
play whatever you'd like.
Yeah? What's that?
What do you want to play, mate?
I don't know. Let's do Every Little Thing.
Yeah. There you go.
Though I tried before to tell her of the feelings I have for her. Every time that I come near her, I just lose my nerve as I've done from the start. Every little thing does magic. Everything she do just turn me on. Even though my life before was tragic, now I know my love for her goes on. Do I have to tell the story of 1,000 rainy days since we first met? It's a big enough umbrella, but it's almost me that ends up getting wet. Are there every little thing you do this magic? Everything you do just turn me on. Even the life before was tragic, now I know my love for her goes on. Every little thing she does magic. Everything she do just turn me on. Even though my life before was tragic, now I know my love for her goes on. We have to do the bridge. Let's have the bridge. I resolve to call her up 1,000 times a day, ask her if she'd marry me in some old-fashioned way. But my silent fears are gripping long before I reach the phone, long before my tongue has tripped me. Must I always be every little thing? You get the idea.
It's funny you mentioned that song because I've never really known what to play on that song.
Yeah. It's very unguitaristic.
I've never really figured it out. And also we're playing it in a different key, and it's just like, it's on the record it's a lot brighter in the brighter key, but we just for one reason or another we changed the key probably to fit the narrative of the song before or the one after, or there's a reason for it.
Guitar solo, it's actually a dual solo, two different guitar players, and it's from a band that are notorious blockers, so I can only play a small bit of it. Here it is. Solo number 11 is by a guitarist that's not playing in one of his actual groups. He's actually sitting in with this band, who happen to be the biggest band of all time. Coming in at number 10 is a guitar solo that's also from a What Makes This Song Great video that I did on this particular band. This is one of my favorite solos by this guitarist, and I like it because it plays over the changes perfectly, and it's really unlike anything he ever played. It's an incredibly melodic solo. Check it out. Solo number 9 is by a band that I've never featured on my channel, and everyone asks me why I don't, because they're also notorious blockers, so I had to recreate a track and hope that it actually doesn't get taken down. But this is a phenomenal. First songs I ever learned on the guitar, and it's actually the first guitar solo I ever learned. As a matter of fact, my mom used to play rhythm guitar while I practiced this solo. That's actually true. Solo number 7, I was going to play, but I actually can't stretch to reach the first lick. I used to be able to years ago, but it goes from 12 to 16 and 19. But the greatest part of this lick, the opening lick, is that it goes through these 4/1 plagal cadences from E to B to G to D. And the rest of the solo is killer too. Check it out. Solo number 6 is from a record that came out in 1982. In fact, the guitarist who's playing the solo actually sings the verse part in this, and he was one of the biggest session guitar players ever. Now, once we get into the top 5, really any of these solos could have been number 1. All of the guitar players in the top 5 are probably my biggest influences. I really was into all their playing, studied it a lot, and I just really think that they're all amazing, amazing solos. Coming in at number 5.